Well, good evening out there. Welcome back to another Workbench Wednesday, everybody. These have been few and far between this year, unfortunately. We've just been very busy at the office, working some later evenings and just trying to keep up with what was a very busy end of the year for us last year at Lionel. A very successful year. The holiday time is always our busiest time of the year as train manufacturers go. And so we've just been busy doing that, and I haven't had the time to get in the workbenches as often. So we did do an impromptu one a couple of weeks back. We're going to get one in here, and then, as some of you probably are already well aware, our next catalog comes out just barely over a week from now, next Thursday. We'll have that launched, and then we'll be very busy with that and podcasts on that for the next few weeks, followed by our trip to Springfield and all sorts of great things. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the catalog tonight. We'll cover all that in a week, but we'll probably do a Workbench Wednesday tonight, and then hopefully come back to this sometime in February after we get through the rush of the catalog and get those orders in. All right. So as I mentioned, this Workbench Wednesday, for those who haven't been here before for this show, it's a chance for us to talk a little bit less about product and a little bit more about modeling and how you can build your own railroad, build your own layout, work with products from Lionel, work with a lot of these techniques, work with kits and products, and trains from any manufacturer, and as much as possible, I try and do this so that it works with you in any scale that you want to take on and that you choose to model in. So we've got tonight. This is actually something that I was working on over the New Year's holiday. I was home here working on a kit for Lionel, something to take to Springfield at the end of the year. It's one of our previously released HO kits. I'll show you the finished model here towards the end as we see the finished product. But we released these kits a little over a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago, I guess, and never really had a chance to build any of the final kits to build them into a nice model for display. So we've been doing that over the past couple of weeks, months here, one by one to get those ready. And as I was working on this one, I came across a neat new technique, something sometimes you get used to modeling things in a certain way, and eventually you just try something new or different every once in a while. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it works great. And this time it worked out really well. I found a new way that I like for painting and weathering concrete. And this was done on an HO plastic kit. But this technique, I think, will work in any scale. I'm sure it'll work in any scale and should really work on any medium because of the materials that we're using. So I thought I'd walk you through that step by step tonight because let's face it, we all have something on our layout that could benefit from this, whether it's a tunnel portal, retaining wall, sidewalks, buildings, culverts, pipe loads, you name it. We've all got something somewhere that we could put a little bit of extra texture on. This is super easy. Anyone can do it. And it'll add a nice little level of realism to your layout. And hopefully, if you haven't tried painting or weathering things before, seeing some of these basic techniques done here will give you the encouragement to try it on this or other models and practices. So let's get started here. I've preset some things here and primed everything and got things ready to go. As we walk through this, I'll show you each of the products that we're using and go step by step. Hopefully you can see things on my messy workbench cam. You can tell I've been at the bench because it's a complete disaster area, but I have my requisite 6 inch by 6 inch square area to work in. That's about all I leave myself. um, so the first step is you take the plastic part or whatever part, this will work on other materials, and give it a quick coat of primer. All right, there's the back of it. You can see is in the unpainted raw plastic. Um, these parts the parts won't be seen. So leave those unpainted. You'll actually get better adhesion when you glue your parts together from plastic to plastic. And no point wasting your time in paint on something that won't be seen. But prime a quick primer over the all the surfaces, all the areas that will eventually take paint. All the paints and stains that we're going to use will stick much better to that primer. Right? The color primer you use doesn't really matter, but I try and sometimes get something that's close to what the final color is going to be. In this case, I used a gray primer. This one came from Krylon, Color Max, get that up there. But the exact shade or style of primer you use doesn't really matter. If you're painting something that's going to end up black, obviously something like a flat black will work very well. Sometimes a white if you're going for a lighter color. Um, You could do a whole bunch of, think about your final paint color and choose a primer that matches. Just want a thin coat over the whole thing so that your paint and subsequent layers have something to stick to. All right. You can do the rest of the step with the parts still on the sprues and the runners here, or you can cut them off in advance. That sort of depends on what you're working with. In this case, I'm going to leave them on for the most part, though I will go ahead and trim off some of the extra little bits just to clean it up a little bit before we go. You can easily touch this up afterwards if you get any marks, but the more things you can eliminate at the start, the better it'll be, easier it'll be in the long run. So I'm just going to clip these little extra tabs off the end. What these are from is in the injection molding process. The tools are designed with a little area for expansion and overflow so that the cavities can be filled completely. And so you'll see on a lot of your runners these little extra parts, these little extra things that stick out, and you just have to trim them off afterwards. You also might get some things like right here. We've got a little bit of flash from where the tool's not quite fitting tight, and you get a little bit of extra plastic over the edge. Those are easy to trim off with a knife as well. You clean those up with a knife, and then a little bit of a light sanding will take off any remaining little bits you have there. And I won't bore you with all that tonight. We've done that in the past on some of our other model builds. But I'll leave these on the runner so it gives me a nice handle to work with for these next couple of steps. So the first step in painting is we're going to give it a base color. And this is going to be just a quick solid color. And what I'm going to use for this, the color that I found that I like, this is good for a newer or cleaner concrete at least. This is a chalk paint, and that's important. And this is Sandstorm from Folk Art. We put that up there. This you can find at pretty much Michael's, Hobby Lobby, any of those normal craft store type places. You'll be able to pick this up. And these come in a variety of colors. But the reason I'm using a chalk paint is multiple reasons. One, it has a little bit of a powdery texture to it, so it's already going to give you a little bit of that grainy feel that you get looking at a slab of concrete. It goes on very nice and evenly, but it also dries very flat. So you have a nice flat surface to work with and apply other finishes over. And when you're doing things like buildings and materials like that we're painting here, a flat finish is very nice. So if you're painting a brand new boxcar, you don't want to use chalk paint. But if you're painting something like this or doing scenery work, roads, buildings, bridges, a chalk paint's a good choice. And you work with it just like you would any other paint. You do want to give it a good shake before you get started. And then, since we don't have a whole lot to do here, I'll be able to do most of the work out of just a little bit of paint that's left over in the lid. You can see here it's a nice sort of grayish, creamish color. And the brush I'm going to be using on this is a little bit of a stiffer brush. Nothing very special about it. Pick one the right size. But this isn't terribly soft. It's got a little bit of stiffness to it. So the next step we do with the stains, I have a much softer brush for. This one, a little bit of a stiff brush. And we're going to dab just a little bit on the end of the brush. I'm not going to load it all the way up. And I'm just not very evenly here. And I'm going to paint the whole bits of the parts that I want to paint. I want to do a thorough job and cover the whole piece, but I'm not particularly worried about this being neat or pretty. In fact, if you use a combination of brush strokes, let me get this more in front of the camera for you, hopefully, brush strokes and stippling, which is more of a dabbing motion, it actually helps give your part a little bit of texture. This is just a base coat. So you don't have to be too particular. We're going to be putting 3 more coats of stain and paint on top of this. I know that sounds like a lot of work. Trust me, it's not, and it goes really quickly. But layering, anytime you're doing any sort of model work, a nice layering will get you much better results and gives you the depth and shadow and highlight and varieties of color that you see in the real world. And again, you see variety in color, and you don't see perfection. You see inconsistencies of variety. So when you're doing a job like this, strive for a little bit of don't strive for perfect. Strive for natural looking. And that can be sometimes that's more intimidating than trying to get it perfect, and sometimes it's a little bit more liberating, depending on your type A or type B tendencies. All right, so we're going to do that. Now, the nice thing about the kit that I'm building is it comes with 2 of these parts and gives you some extra pieces. And I'm actually doing parts here for 2 kits because I'm going to be eventually combining 2 of these. Now that I've built one, the next one I build is going to be 2 of them together for my layout and make it a taller building. But that means I don't have to paint the extra doorways and walkways and windows and things right now. So I'll leave those, and we'll keep on moving. Now you want to let this dry. It doesn't take long to dry. This is an acrylic paint. I'm going to clean out the brush in my, what was at one time clean water. Now looks like coffee. So we'll get the brush cleaned out. We'll be coming back to this paint again a little bit later. That'll take a few minutes to dry. If you have time, depending on how quickly you're working and what you're working, the longer you let that dry, the better, so that it really sets up nice. But the nice thing with acrylics is they do dry pretty quickly, so you don't have to wait a long time. All right. As I said, that was a sandstorm colored chalk paint. It airs more on the side of a lighter gray. If you want to do an older concrete tends to yellow a little bit, or become a little bit more tan as it gets older. Another popular color that you see used a lot, this is Cocoon. You can use, and there are similar colors like this in the acrylic paint world. A more creamy or tan color can be used as a base, and this will work just the same way. You can see there from the lid a little bit darker if you want to go with more of a dark aged concrete look. This works very well, but all the other steps here are going to be the same. Before I move on to step 2 here, let me just double check real quick and see if we have some comments here. We've got quite a few Happy New Year's and welcomes. I will just say Happy New Year and welcome to everybody. It's great to see you all back here again. I hope you all did have a great Christmas and holiday season and got the trains out, and maybe got some new Christmas trains to run and enjoy. And it's great to be back on here. And of course, you've always got some project questions, and by all means send them in here. I will review them and look at them and make notes of things for what people are asking for. But we're not going to talk product tonight, so we'll be focusing on the workbench tonight. Peter, as I mentioned, the catalog comes out next Thursday, so you don't have very long to wait, and we'll be talking all about that next week. All right, let me go back to the workbench here and step number 2. All right, once we've painted this, I've painted this one ahead of time. All right, before when I got home tonight, I quick did a step of these, each step at a time, so you wouldn't have to wait for paint to dry. Because listening to me talk is only slightly less boring than watching paint dry. Slightly. But we're going to move on to the first step of stain on this. And this has been painted with that color. So you see it's already got a decent look to it. The next thing we're going to start doing is introducing some stains. And the stains that I like to use are made by a company called Best Trains. And I'm going to put their website up here now. They make these stains in a whole variety of colors. And you can use these for pretty much anything, whether it's building projects like this, wood structures, plastic models. I've used these on a lot of different materials, a lot of different occasions, and get some really great results with them. So I highly recommend you check them out at besttrains.com. It's a nice little family-run company too. That some real nice folks, and they just make a great product. It's nice to support some of the smaller guys in this industry. The first color that we're going to use is one that you might not think of when you think concrete, and that's where I think I stumbled into something fun with my new techniques over the weekend, and that is an old or dark rust. We have here. These are what their bottles look like. Very nice product. And this is an alcohol-based stain. Again, you really want to shake it up each time. Or usually you do. Sometimes actually if you want a slightly lighter wash, you can not shake it, leave the sediment down at the bottom, and you'll get a little bit of a lighter color. So these are an alcohol-based stain, so they go on quickly and evenly. There's no odor. There's no, other than that shaking up, there's no real mixing or anything you've got to do with this, nothing special. And they dry very quickly. So you can actually go from one color to the next after just a couple of minutes. I do find it's nice to let them dry completely so that you don't get swirling and blending going on, but it doesn't take long. You don't need to let this sit overnight by any means. All right. And as we apply the stain here, what I'm going to do, you're going to notice I'm not being very even with this. I am just really sort of slopping it on there. I'm leaving a few areas where it's a little lighter, a few areas where it's a little darker, and that's intentional. This is giving us a little bit of background color. You can do as much or as little of this as you like. Add as much or as little tone to your model as you want. If you just brush it on, it will typically sit more on the surface if you have a very almost dry brush. If you load up the brush with a little bit more liquid and dab it and keep the model relatively flat so that gravity helps you here, you can puddle it a little bit and it will settle in and find all of those low-lying areas and get a little bit darker for you. Don't forget on stuff like here too, get the tops, get the sides. How heavy and how light you want to go is up to you. One thing you will learn with this is it dries a little bit, usually dries a little bit less intense than you see it going on wet. But the colors do shift a little bit. Again, you're not worried about perfection here because we're going to cover this still with more colors and change the tones. But this is already starting to set up and dry on me. All right, so we give it a nice wash of that, and that gives it a bit of a brown undertone. All right, set that aside to dry. Wash out my brush here real quick. Next, we're going to move in with another stain. Here's the dark rust or old rust after it's been on and dry. Again, you can see here, hopefully that's picking up in the light. It's sort of weird the way the light falls. If I get zoom in close, I get past the light and you go into a shadow. But you can hopefully see there that it's not perfect. It's not an even coat. There's some areas that are still more gray and areas that are more brown. And that's good. This is going to even that out a little bit and tie things together. But next we're just going to go on with a very complicated color, black. You could also use a homemade India ink wash for this if you've got a black wash that you use of your own. We've talked about that in past episodes here of making your own. I keep a bottle of that here on the bench as well. That's a little bit lighter, a little bit less intense than the Votero. But honestly, since I picked up bottles of this, I hardly ever use that anymore. The pre-mixed stuff just is so much nicer and more consistent and easier to go with. So with this, we're going to go over the whole model. And again, try and give it a nice even coat. Not perfect, but a little bit more even than we went on the rust color. And you can see that again, that black tends to want to find those low areas and cracks and crevices. And that's perfect because that will give the model a lot more depth when we're done. It's getting that low level and shadow feature that you want. Again, you can vary this. Now, if you're doing something and you say, you know what, you're done, it dries, that's not brown enough, that's not dark enough, it's very easy to put a second coat on. Just come back and do a little bit more. So short, easy layers work very well with this. You can always make it darker very easily by just adding a little bit more or a second coat of wash. All right? And that's all there is to it. We've now completed the staining portion of this process. Dry out that brush. And cap up the stain before it makes a mess. All right. So here's a completed version of that. The pieces have been given a black and brown wash. Some of these look a little darker than I probably would have liked to have gone. That's not a problem. We're going to clean that up real quick here in this next step. But it's already starting to get a little bit of a nice modeled concrete look, and quite happy with the way these work out. The last step is going to be what we call dry brushing. It's another technique we've just talked about here in the past, but haven't done it in a little while. It's a really easy skill to learn, and you're going to use this a lot. This is really good for bringing out highlights in anything. All right, let's see here. We're going to get out the same color that we started with, that same concrete color, and I'm going to use a pretty old scraggly brush for this. There's nothing special about this brush except that it has, been through the battles. It's pretty worn and beat. It's somewhere between stiff and soft. It depends which part of the brush you're on, I guess. But it's a nice grungy brush that's good for scrubbing. As you go through it, start with a nice brush for your detail work and things like that. Take care of your brushes and they'll last you a long, long time. But eventually, they all start to wear. And as they do, you sort of downgrade them into different jobs. Dry brushing brushes are one step down from your washes and your nice painting. They're one step up from doing chalk work. Once you use them for chalks and powders, never go back to paint. But you can still get a lot of life out of them here doing the dry brushing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of paint on the end of the brush and then wipe most of it off on a paper towel or a scrap of cardboard. And then go to the model and just start dry brushing over top of what's there. And hopefully I'm close enough that you can see how this is going to go on. Now, when you do this, I'm not really, you can see, digging into the low areas where most of the stain settled. I'm trying to stay on the larger and higher areas, like the upper ridges here, or this rougher texture surface, going over some of those areas where it's a little darker than I would have liked, or some of the details. This is a great way to highlight and bring out some of the details in the paint or in the plastic finish. And it brings back any of that concrete color originally that you sort of lost in the process. As well as introducing, again, now some new tones. That black wash, where it doesn't look black, it at least changes it to a different gray hue. And this is bringing back some of the other hues. As it wear out, you just dab on some more, brush everything off. I tend to start light on the model and then apply more pressure as I go so I don't get too much paint in places that I don't want unexpectedly. This may show up really well here for highlighting details on this entryway. I do this. That's a little heavy. Brushing that off. You can see here, if I just go very lightly over the surface of this model, I'm just picking up edges and highlights. And that's bringing out all the finer details in this rather ornate entryway. And then after I've done that, I can come in a little bit stronger with more of a scrub on some of these columns I thought got a little too dark, and we'll lighten those up. Don't want to forget the top there. Hopefully you're able to see some of this on the camera. Hope that's working okay. This is probably the most time-consuming part because you've got a lot of pieces to do, and you take a little bit more time with this, as opposed to the earlier steps where you really are just kind of splashing them on because you know you're going to be covering it up later. This is your chance to cover up any mistakes that you made, things you don't like, and take your time and really look at and focus on what you're doing. But it's not hard, and it's actually very nice, relaxing work that takes your mind off of whatever else has been stressing you out all day long. Not that making model trains is a stressful job, but sometimes it's nice to come home and not be on email, worried about production schedules, and just spend some time having fun and enjoying the hobby. So we'll do a few there like that. And I'll leave that for me to finish the rest up in my spare time. Clean out the brush a little bit. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I'm going to get out the model I started this one and show you the finished product on that here in just a second. Put all the wet paints away so we don't mess up a week's worth of modeling. Let's see what we got here comment wise. Yep, that's pretty good, Bill. I don't read much, but they got a lot of pretty pictures in them, so that's what I do. I just look at the pictures. And let's see here. Here we go. All right, so this is the finished model. This is the kit that I've been working with here. This is our HO scale building on fire, and hopefully you can see there at the top for the molding around the top and the sides and the porch and so forth. How nicely that turned out as a concrete trim piece. The concrete for the sidewalk I did with a more aged or yellow concrete, so you see some of the contrast there. Now, of course, the highlight of this building isn't the exterior, it's the interior. And by that, of course, I mean the fact that, this thing catches fire. Not really, but we've got a pretty cool smoke unit in there. We make a building like this built up in O gauge as well. Nice burning house, and we use a very similar mechanism in Sergeant Stumpy's fireworks station. For those who may have seen that accessory, that goes a little step further than this. It's not just doesn't have the flickery flame effect inside with the lighting, but you get the whole fireworks going off with the fiber optics and sound effects and everything else along with it. So that's a real fun accessory. Something I'd like to see come to other scales in the future as well. We have some more fun things to set ablaze and have fun with your plan for the future as well. Let's put this. I'm just plugging this into a CW80. We'll give it a minute or two to warm up and get the smoke going. But we've never really, as I said, we started this off as a way to do some new models or to bring some models to life that hadn't really had a nice showing yet. So we'll be taking this to Springfield here towards the end of the year. End of the month. And here you can see some of the effect going here. This inside, this on the O gauge version of the burning building has a dual smoke unit built in there. And it's a pretty cool feature. This is the same smoke unit that we use in our legacy steam locomotives to get both the stack and whistle smoke effects out of the engine. So you've got two smoke units burning in there, run on AC or DC power, 12 to 18 volts. So a variety of power supplies. And it has two settings too. You can go low or high depending on how much smoke you want to put out. But this is a pretty cool accessory that will be a highlight on any layout, and gives you a chance. Everyone, a lot of people like to collect the fire truck die casts or display models, and this would give you a cool scene to pose some of those with as well. Plans are for this on my layout to be a fire insurance company because I appreciate irony, but you can make the building whatever you wanted to catch fire. So there we go. It gives you a neat effect. But again, pulling in here close on what we did tonight, you can see how nice the weathered concrete looks. Not too even, not too solid a color, and a very quick and easy effect that I think translates even better in person than it sometimes does on the camera. But that's the effect that you'll get, minus the smog and fog machine going here in the background. Turn you off. Okay, hopefully y'all can still see me. I took the cell phone camera off, and when that's on, it has to be my microphone, and we get all sorts of crazy feedback. So a couple of announcements. A lot of people have been asking again. I mentioned it at the top of the broadcast. I'll throw it out there again. Next Thursday, the 12th, is Catalog Day. For those who are anxiously awaiting a new year of goodies, it is quite a big book this time around. I'm really proud of this one. I think it's one of the better catalogs we've done in the last couple of years. I'm not going to tell you everything that's in it, not until next week. But it should go live 10 o'clock in the morning on the website. The printed copies will be getting mailed out to dealers around that same time, so you should see those not too long after that. And then we will start with our usual host of broadcasts following that. The big catalog show here on our channel will start at, I believe it's 3 o'clock Thursday afternoon. It'll be, of course, Dave and Megan and Corey and myself, and we'll go page by page through the whole kit and caboodle until we've all lost our voices and talk about all the great new products that are in there. It's not too far after that. I've mentioned we have the show at Springfield. It's a great train show. No matter what part of the hobby you're interested in, please, if you're anywhere able to make it to the Springfield, Massachusetts area, this is a show that at some point you should probably try and attend. They've got everything you could ever want there in every scale. A lot of the small manufacturers, scenery makers, detail parts makers, they're there. You've got prototype collectors and video companies and book publishers, and we're all there, and we have a great time. Blizzards or no blizzards, it's always a fun show. So make it a point to be there for that if you can. That's the last weekend in January, and Saturday and Sunday show in Springfield, Massachusetts. Look that one up online, and hopefully we'll see some of you there. There will be plenty of things on social media as well coming out of that. There are always a lot of great new product announcements that come out of Springfield. And then we'll be finishing up through February with more catalog shows with some of our friends with our dealers and other podcasts with fans and things like that. So lots of time to talk about new trains in the coming weeks ahead, so that you can prepare your budgets for this year and for 2023. So I hope you enjoyed a little bit of break from that. I enjoyed having a chance to sit down at the workbench and get my hands on something other than a keyboard for a little while. Hope you all get a chance to do that and enjoy the hobby as well. As I mentioned, hope everyone's had a happy and wonderful 2022 and is off to a good start in 2023. And we look forward to seeing you all year long here at Lionel, whether it's in person or through social or just through your comments and whatnot. Please keep them coming. We appreciate that. And you're the reason we do all this. So thank you very much. I've talked long enough. We'll let you all go. Have a great night. And we will see you again back here at the workbench in a few weeks. Take care, everybody.